there kittens. So I just want to take a moment to talk to you about your regular standing posture, dance posture for American tribal style, which was my dance style, and anatomical neutral and Tadasana from yoga. Now you can do this along with me, so go ahead and stand up and join me. I want you to just move your body around. Doesn't have to be a big movement, but just try to not pay attention to your posture, which is kind of hard because I've mentioned it, so now you're going to be aware of it. But just kind of jump up and down and then stand how you would normally stand. Try not to change anything and just notice. So for me, my regular sort of standing posture, if I just take a look at this, this is me totally relaxed, my belly is hanging out here. My thumbs are pointing in towards each other, so I'm going to go from top down rather than down up. My thumbs are pointing in towards each other because I have a medial rotation to my shoulders. So notice this about your own body, whether your thumbs are pointing forwards, so your shoulders are neutral, whether they're pointing out to the sides, or whether they're pointing in, so your shoulders are rounded, which is going to be a lot of us, especially my climbers. And then my belly is nice and relaxed, which is cool because we don't want to be holding it in all the time. However, my weight, if I turn to the side, I'll just kick it out again. If I turn to the side, then my belly hangs out and my hips, my pelvis, is in an anterior tilt. My weight is shifted forward into my toes. This is how I regularly stand when I'm not paying attention. Weight is shifted forward to the toes, so my pelvis is actually forward. You can't see my feet in this video, unfortunately, but my weight is shifted way forward, my pelvis is shifted forward. This is pulling my pelvis into an anterior tilt, so hip bones pointing down rather than neutral. And that's putting a lot of pressure on my lumbar spine, so my lower back is compacted here, contracting in and compact rather than lots of space. So here's how I used to cue. Oh, first of all, here's how I used to stand. So I've trained myself to, over the past 10 years, I haven't done this dance style for about 3 years, but my dance posture was the most comfortable way for me to stand. So stiffening out the left leg is supporting me, and then coming up onto the toes, so into a kind of showgirl position with my right hip, so my pelvis is rotating out to the right. I'm on the ball of my foot here, so this is shortening my hip flexor, rotating my pelvis to the right. Drawing low belly in, looks nice, yeah. And then from here, lifting the chest, and then pulling back on my right arm with my lat dorsi and teres major. So they're continually engaged. So this is short and tight. This is short and tight. My right QL and right erectospinae, lower back muscles, they're on like Donkey Kong. And my hip is lifted. So this, for me, was extremely comfortable. Chest rotated around to the audience. Hips are in a position where my feet are pointing to 11 o'clock on a clock face, whereas my chest is rotated to 12 o'clock. And to facilitate this, so that I'm not here, lots of engagement in the upper lats on the right hand side, upper back muscles, to pull myself into this dance position. We never did it on the left hand side. So there was never the same position, never the same rotation. I feel like this just wasn't a thing, and it feels very alien to me as well. So after doing that dance style for 10 years, I now have a complete, and you can see some of my other posts to see this for yourself, but I have a complete imbalance on one side of my body. So the right side of my body is tight, 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 engage. And I have a shoulder injury from about 5 years ago, which I'm in the middle of rehabbing. And the left side of me is longer, but it's kind of stockier. So my left hip is more open. But yeah, so there's a lot of imbalance going on. And this is because I would spend all day at a desk and then leave that desk, do no movement whatsoever, and then go into my dance class. And there was never really any cross-training, which is how I got my shoulder injury. So if you're noticing that you're spending time doing yoga, you're spending time doing climbing, you're spending time doing whatever your sport is, or maybe you're just working on your body, you might start to realize, oh, I'm feeling now when I'm just standing in a regular position, I'm finding that I'm shifting my weight. So often when we stand talking to a friend, maybe not this exaggeration, but we might stand and like, oh yeah, and have a leg that we tend to dump our weight into. And in fact, when we used to teach taksim to our students, we would say, stand as if you're waiting for a bus, with your weight on one leg, and then switch the weight. Because this is often what we'll do. We'll switch the weight from side to side. And then we would teach that. We would use that kind of thing that we do every day to teach the movement of the hips. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just pointing out the fact that we will often go into what feels comfortable, just dumping into one side. So it's quite difficult to stand and wait for a bus to attention. So if I ask you to come to anatomical neutral. This is anatomical neutral, palms facing forward, so your shoulders are kind of open. And feet are about hips width or coming to the outside of your hips width apart. Now if I ask you to come to Tadasana, traditionally you would often be taught to bring the big toes together, keep a little bit of a gap between the heels, straight legs, and then palms facing forward. This is your Tadasana. Now I used to give a lot of cues for this. I'll take you through my version of Tadasana before I looked at this a little deeper. And it was to tackle all of these things. And I still will use it sometimes depending on what my intention is. So I would say stand with your feet hips distance apart to the outside of the hips, and I never ever say toes forward. Why? Because I have tibial torsion in my right tibia, which means that while my left toes point forward, my right toes point out to the side. Now I personally have femur bones which are medially rotated in that hip socket. So just because of the shape of my pelvis, my acetabulum, just my bones in general, my femur bones are medially rotated, so they love doing things like your eagle legs, no issue, right? No trouble, too easy. Same with my shoulders. But if you ask me to do lotus pose, I am not going to get anywhere near this idea, like this knee's not going down without a fight. So some people have externally rotated femur bones in their hips, and often their toes will point out to the side. So you can see this if you start to watch people walking down the street. You'll see people with their feet kind of like walking like duck feet. And those people will be able to get into Padmasana, your lotus thing, really easily, but will struggle with things like Garudasana, eagle pose, right? So the shape of your bones and the orientation of your bones in the different sockets will dictate what poses you can and can't do. So in terms of posture, because this is the kind of main thing I wanted to bring in here, my Tadasana would be feet hips distance. I'm going to do this at a bit of an angle so you can see. Find engagement in the feet, so pressing into all four corners of your feet, almost like you're creating a little suction cup feeling with the ground. So pada bandha, pada, foot, bandha, an energy lock. So find that pada bandha. And I would even tell people to lift their toes to engage the medial arch of the foot and feel that pada bandha, that foot pressing down. Do this with me now. And then relax the toes, but keep that pada bandha. Now from here, engaging the quadriceps, to lift the kneecaps up. So when you engage your quads, get that feeling of engaging here, you'll feel like your kneecaps lift up the legs a little bit. It actually feels like your legs are fully energized. And then from here, find your hip bones, your ASIS, find your hip bones. And then without sort of shoving them, just imagine just with your muscles, try and move the hip bones towards each other. This is actually from Pilates, they call it the B line. So engaging your lowest rectus abdominis muscles to draw the AS-IS together. Then from here, we might find that our ribs are exploding or our chest is kind of down. So we want to feel like we're lifting from the sternum. So we have this pulling in of the low belly, lift the sternum up. But as a belly dancer, when you lift your sternum up, quite often your ribs will explode out to the sides. We do this quite a lot in belly dance because we want our undulations to appear large. So when we bring the chest up, we'll explode the ribs out. So we want to get this feeling of drawing the ribs in. However, if you're teaching someone who is type A and a belly dancer and has lots of control and articulation over the muscles in the center of their body especially, then when you say sternum up, ribs in, then they may come into this position, which you don't want to be in. So, where were we? Engaging up through all of the legs, drawing the hip bones in, engaging that low belly, lifting the sternum high, but again making sure that we're not rib exploding, so closing the lower ribs in. And then from here, roll the shoulders up, back and down, turn the palms to face forward. Now, this is a lot of work to keep all of these engagements on, lifting the toes, engaging that medial arch. Try and do all of this with me. So engaging the feet, pressing down and lifting the toes, but then slightly relaxing the toes, then engaging the quadriceps, lifting the kneecaps up so the legs are engaged. Feel the glutes squeezing, so the sides of your glutes are squeezing in, hip bones moving in towards each other, lower rectus abdominis engages. Feel that lifting up of mula bandha, so your pelvic floor, lifting up, and then pulling in and up in the belly button, so you're going into Uddiyana bandha, lifting, and then closing the lower ribs, and then shoulder blades down the back, squeeze in between the shoulder blades. Relax. Right, so that's a lot. And I used to teach that way, I don't anymore. So that's a lot of cueing, so, and this is your most engaged Tadasana. What I would have you do instead is just notice where your pelvis is when you're standing naturally, right? So notice if you tend to bring your weight forward into the toes and your pelvis tends to go forward, or if you tend to have your weight in your heels, and just you can stand and move your weight forward and back, so move your pelvis forward and back. Try and find that neutral place. So I would say, just bring your heels, just bring your pelvis, a little bit over the heels, a little bit more back over the heels. And you might find that your toes can wiggle and relax. And then from here, I do still cue that drawing in of the AS-IS, so drawing in. Here's another way though, that I learned. So pelvis over the heels, I'm going to credit my teachers now. Pelvis coming back over the heels, that's from Bree of Hearts and Bones Yoga, who I'm doing a 300 hour with at the moment. And then from my yin teacher, Bernie Clark, bring your fingers. This is going to be really great for core work. Bring your fingers to the outsides of your torso. And then from here, instead of drawing the hip bones towards each other, and then closing the lowest ribs, let's see, can I roll this up so you can see? Instead of this feeling of everything pulling in, which by the way you still have to breathe, so this is not going to be conducive to taking a breath unless you're doing Pilates lateral breathing. So try and relax everything, let your quarantine belly hang out. Now bringing the fingertips to the sides, push your belly out, really let it out, don't be afraid. I'm doing this on Instagram, so you certainly can. Push your belly out, fingertips to the side. Now try to, without drawing that belly in, try to push into the sides. So try to push into the fingers, like you're engaging into the sides. So create some space for the belly by relaxing it, and even see if you can create some space between the hip bones and the lowest ribs. So find this elongation here. And without having this rib explosion, don't worry, this is going to get corrected with this one move. So space in between ribs and hips, relaxing the belly at the front, Now, try, and this takes a while to get, so don't worry, try to press into your fingertips at the side, bracing and spacing. What automatically should happen, and it might take you a couple of goes of like, hang on, really relax, create that space, lifting the rib cage away from the pelvis, and then pressing into the fingertips at the sides. What should happen naturally is the B-line gets engaged and the ribs come down. Instead of exploding out, they come down. And you have this feeling of support from your core. So now, Tadasana, stand with your feet in a way that feels strong. Find a neutral position for your pelvis so that you have this anterior tilt and posterior tilt. So we can give lots of cues about how to have the pelvis. Instead, stand with your feet hips distance or in a way that makes you feel comfortable and strong. Shift your weight back towards your heels just a little bit. Your glutes are going to automatically say hello, just a little. And then find that idea of bracing and spacing. So creating space between the chest and the pelvis, spacing, and then bracing, pressing out into the side abdominals. This has happened and this has happened without you having to say, lower the ribs down. Right? So shift the weight back onto the heels, create space, brace, shoulders up, back and down, relax the shoulders, palms face forward. Notice how that feels for you, notice if it helps, I hope it does. And if you're wondering why I've taken all of those obsessive little muscular cues out of my classes, then that's why. Notice how you're standing day to day. If you spend a lot of time in a chair, try to spend a bit more time sat on the floor. If you sit on the, like me, if you sit on the floor a lot and you notice that you always sit in the same way, try to change that. If you notice that you have a rotation in your pelvis, so when I'm standing, mutually, my right hip goes that way. So if you have a rotation in your hip, and if you have a good teacher, they can see this about you, so you can get postural analysis done by a good teacher. So for me, I'm having to sit a different way and actively rotate to the other side. So if I'm talking to camera to you here, if you were one of my buddies and we were having a conversation, I would want to be facing away from you but then rotating towards you to try to counterbalance some of that tightness in my hip flexors, in my iliopsoas, everything that's been going on for 10 years, now I'm trying to counter that and twist the other way. So know yourself. The best thing you can do is get to know your own body, get to know your own posture, get to know how you stand, and know that variation is key. So if you're always doing the same thing the same way over and over and over, you are teaching your body to stand that way, you're teaching your body to always sit that way, and the same goes for when you sleep, which for a lot of us we can't change, because even if we start with good intentions, in the night we'll roll over some other way. But just try to notice. Your step one is notice. Be mindful, notice your posture, notice how you're holding your body, and then see if you can become more aware of where your pelvis is in space, whether you are habitually through stress or fear or anxiety holding your shoulders up. Can you relax your shoulders down? Can we connect to the parasympathetic nervous system? There's so much more that we can unpack here, but just talking about posture today and how we can improve our Tadasana with this idea of bracing and spacing, bringing the weight back into the heels a little bit, and you shouldn't need all of those extra cues, because just the action of this and this should bring you into a Tadasana that feels good. Have fun, play with it.